Thank you, John. That was certainly a rough introduction. I do appreciate it. Well, my job here is just to put a context to what we're doing, but I find it interesting that he talks about Michelangelo. When you talk to Michelangelo, the narrative goes that with the statue of David, you know, where'd you come up with this design? He said, you know what? It was always in that block of marble. I just brought it out. I just brought it out. I think that's what we need to focus on when we look at what we do. There's a lot of things there that we need to bring out as leaders. So today I brought a panel with me, Dr. Glass and Kara Wanza, two by the same name so I can remember who they are. Dr. Martins from the high school, and she works as an API, and Dr. Christie is API at the middle school. We tried to reduce our central office and put people in the field, so we are kind of like this in a way, but we do have people that work from central office but work to coordinate the buildings, and that's what our two associates will do. So today they'll talk about the buildings, and then Carol Wands will talk about some of the data that's really relatively new. We want to try to narrow the focus, as Jonathan talked about today, and then we want to develop the process. I think when you leave the conferences here, when I sit out there with you, watching these things, you know, what's in it for me? And we want to bring something so that you can put something down and maybe take home and refine what you do have. Like Curly said, though, in City Slickers, there is no one way to do it, you know, number one. But it might be something that would help you. And then we want to talk about the most important thing is to support the schools and how we do that. The district profile, a little bit about Danbury. We have almost 11,000 students. The last, I've been there 9 years. We've gone from 9,200 to almost 11,000. We have about 12% SPED population. That's pretty about the national averages below. What's growing tremendously in Danbury, like everywhere else, the ELL population. Right now, 42% of our students are Hispanic, 39% are non-Hispanic, and those non-Hispanic white, 20% of them speak a language other than English in their home. So that's what we're dealing with in terms of what they bring to the school, the richness that they bring. And then we have 55% is the average. We have some schools at 80%, but most of them are above 35, 37%. We have 19 schools. Largest high school in the state of about 3,100 to go to 3,500. 3 middle schools and 11 elementaries, an alternative high school and an alternative middle school as well. Jonathan used my slide. This is basically the chaos that I know I was feeling when all of this came in front of me. You hear Sarah, I know it though, I felt I was in the cravat, Sarah, by the way, you're talking about the mountains. I was down below when you were talking about all these things. Jonathan came into the district and we were doing some organizing of the administrators, and we looked at things that we did well, that we could stop doing, and things that we didn't do so well that we needed to increase doing in order to make a difference in the lives of our kids. Then the light went on in my head. You know, how can I use that to help me in terms of bringing some order to this disorder? And that's what chaos theory is, by the way. We all know that. It's kind of unpredictable. We don't know what's going to happen. Things do not run in a good order. And Sarah talked about setting a path. If you think about the work that you did in your development work before you became that teacher, you talked about a lot of developmental psychology. An organization such as a school is an organization. And if that organization can align itself, that social organization can align itself with the goals of a teacher and the goals of the school and the district, we have compliance. We have, when I say compliance, homeostasis, which means that there is safety then. Some of the Maslow work. Okay, sometimes it blows my mind what I do remember from graduate school and the rest. But I needed that peace of mind through all of this chaos. And I think that we were able to find that through the Coherence work. The next thing for me was to figure out, okay, how do I take, if I can create this alliance between the IGDs and the SPIs and DPIs, then that might bring some safety and some order to what we're doing. It gave us a language to talk to people so that they weren't as confusing. They didn't have to focus on what might happen, but we had some answers to this chaos that made some sense to them. And then we thought about, okay, how do we leverage the thing? I know Jonathan talked about the best practices, and we went through that system. But for me, I was trying to figure out, you know, how do we take some of Vesky's work in terms of get that zone of proximity for not only for learning, but for the organization. how do I take that? And I think those of you that are superintendents in here always try to figure that out. We don't want to overburden people, but we got to stretch. And if you can stretch a youngster and a teacher saying, how do we challenge and put it in their zone? Well, how do we challenge the faculty and the administrators, put it in their zone and make a difference? Well, this plan here created. So we had the alliance of the goals. We had now the focus that we could move in a direction. And then what we had to do is figure out how we could balance that and move it forward. We chose two of the practices. The reason why we chose two practices, we felt as though that one would be too myopic. The two gave us the two areas that we needed to move in. And by the way, this was not done in a vacuum. It was done with faculty meetings, and that process, this was part of a strategic planning that really turned into something useful instead of something that sat on a shelf, quite frankly, because we're actually doing it. So as you look at how this comes down, it goes into a funnel, that tool, and we created these goals that in the organization for the peace of mind, and those IAGDs are then aligned to the PD that Jonathan talked about. Okay, so we have the organizational goals, you have the student goals, and you have the faculty goals, and that's how it works. From the Board of Education's goals that I've had them adopt, they're my goals, they're Bill's goals at the central office. They go to PD in terms of our development, and we've adopted the Marzano work, and that's helped us tremendously. And we use that lens, Bill will talk about through our theory of action, on how we actualize that. And then we move into collecting the data that Kara will talk about. And the two areas of coherence that we think gives us the leverage point, you know, the tipping point that we all want to achieve, to get to that tipping point, to really make a difference in argumentative writing and problem solving, we felt would do what we need to do. Just to work with, and we keep telling people, this is just to work, we have a tremendous learning gap in Danbury, in access, equity, and also academically. And we feel this work will focus that, but we have all the other work to do as well. These two elements will challenge, we feel, the upper level as well as those that we're trying to remediate. So, what do we have the focus that Jonathan talked about? The action set from the district, so it's plain, people know it. It's not that complicated, it's the KISS method. Keep it simple, Sal. I try to do it. Then we develop level goals, we develop school goals, teacher level goals, and then ultimately student level goals. I was talking to a kindergarten teacher and figuring out, you know, how to do the argumentative writing. They sat down, the kids made some choices about what they did in the weekend. Some kids went to the movies, some kids did something else, and she had the kids build facts about it, then the kids talked about it, and they actually supported why they made the choices in kindergarten. I mean, you know, you don't get there without the right people on the bus, and I think I brought a good bus here today. You know, I'm just doing the overlay to provide kind of the work from up here, but it doesn't get done. Those of us in central office know unless we have people that are smart and can work with people, make connections, and get it done. I have good teachers, I'm fortunate, and I've got a great administrative staff to bring to you today to talk about what they actually did. And at the end of the session, we'll stay around and then try to drill us down more, because this is kind of really topographic. It's not so granular, but if you come into sessions, I think we can provide that for you. And thank you, Jonathan, for the work you've done with us. Dr. Glass?
Thanks, Al. Good morning, everybody. Just before I start, I want to echo what Sarah said. Where's Sarah? I lost her. Hi. It's wonderful to be here. So many of my personal friends are here, some wonderful people that we've had the pleasure of working with. So thank you very much. I very rarely, if ever, disagree with my good friend Jonathan, but he periodically talks about being vertically challenged, but I think he is a very big man, and we're really grateful to him. The other piece is that I love the Vitruvian Man, but now I have this image of the Vitruvian Man with Sal's face and a fig leaf, and I think we're going to have a lot of problems with that. So we're giving you the 5,000-foot view. We're going to be going through this very, very quickly. Theory of action, if statements, followed by then statements, typical thesis statements. And our arguments are really all based on our theory of action. Our prime directive, all decisions are made in the best interest of children. It sounds like, duh, we'll tell something you don't know. It's very, very difficult in an organization like a school system to do that. Many adults feel that the decision should be made in their best interest. They should have more of a comfort level, which sometimes gives kids more of a discomfort level, and our argument is directly the opposite of that. Gladhorn's work, the written curriculum becomes a taught curriculum, becomes the tested curriculum. So we have one curriculum framework, we call it the curriculum basket. We have curriculum boot camp that our team over here sends folks through. Nobody writes curriculum unless they go through boot camp. It's very difficult to tell curriculum A from curriculum B. They all look identical, standards-based, central questions, CFAs, etc. The content is different, but the model is the same. And everybody goes through that model. All on the Common Core and all the other good stuff. If you think about it, if we write it, we spend all the time and effort to put it into place. That is what we should be teaching. We teach what we write. The only time we teach something beyond what we've written is if we've taught to mastery. And by the way, I see people taking pictures. We'll put this on our website to make it a little bit easier for you, so no problem at all. All of our stuff is on our website. You can just harvest anything you want. So what we write is what we teach. If we go beyond that, it's for extension purposes. And we think it's sort of educational malpractice if you test kids on something that they haven't been taught, unless you're doing benchmarking to say, well, where are you today? And then we'll check in mid-year and then at the end of the year. So through this process, the written becomes the taught, becomes the tested. Doug Reeves and others have looked at a lot of the research out there on fidelity of implementation. I think Sarah mentioned that earlier this morning. The research, just if you're not that familiar with it, if you have 25% of your team implementing your program with fidelity, you'll have about 25% return on your investment with regard to kids. If you have 50% of your team with fidelity, you still only have 25% return. 75% fidelity, 25% return. It's not until you get up to the 90 to 95% range that you have exponential growth. So we're very, very big. This is one of our mission critical pieces. We always work on the concept of fidelity of implementation. We're very much along the lines of the medical model. We diagnose, then we prescribe. We have some wonderfully smart people that make Sal and make me look much better than we actually are. Four of them are sitting right here. If I let them loose in the room with chart paper across the place, they would come up with thousands of instructional strategies, all being very excellent. However, our argument, the argument we made to ourselves is we really have to do a much deeper level of diagnosis. We do things like the 5 Whys or the fishbone or all different kinds of data mining activities. Kara, our data goddess, is over there, makes us a lot smarter with this. We spend much more time studying data and getting down to root cause and much less time developing an instructional prescription. It's very laser-like in its focus because we now know what the root cause is. We don't have to try and address this. We address a very tiny segment that's really bogging us down. Ronald Reagan, I believe you, just prove it to me. So we're very evidentiary in nature. Our budget, let me just see if we have this. Yes, we do. Actually, let me jump over here for a second. Bottom left-hand side, your bottom left-hand side, budget. We are 8th from the bottom in Connecticut in terms of per pupil expenditure. So we're really, we struggle mightily with resources. We just don't have very much to go around. So we're really, really careful about how we spend our money. If you can't make a direct nexus to one of those 2 primary goals that we have, we really see them as being interwoven. If you can't do that, don't come knocking. If you come knocking and you can't make that connection, you're always invited to come back, but you have to make a direct connection to our core work, our core mission with your budget. Less is more. You heard Jonathan talk about the Pareto principle. We really believe that. 80% bang for 20% of your buck. And we're finding that that's moving us faster than we've ever been able to move before. So that less is more is really critical for us. There is a Zen saying that's been turned into kind of a national saying, international saying, fall down 6 times, get up 7. And so we fall a lot. It's just what we do. We're on the edge a lot. As I said, we have wonderful people. I would have any one of them over to my house for dinner. I certainly would go to their house for dinner, hint, hint. But we argue a lot. When people come into the room, they see this frenzy of argument. but it's always collegial and professional around how do we get smarter on this. So we make mistakes, we're always out there on the edge taking risks, we fall down, but we get back up again. So the message with that one is resilience, and the fact that we really work on being as resilient as we possibly can. One of us is leaning, the other group comes and pulls that person up. And the last piece, and you heard Sal mention 9 years, folks in positions like ours in an urban setting, your typical life expectancy is about 3 years. So Sal has been in Danbury for 9 years, I've been here for 16 years. That stability of leadership really makes a difference. We're not suggesting for a minute, I have too many people that know us both in the room, we're not suggesting we're stable individuals by any means. We're just saying the stability that we've been able to engender in Danbury has allowed us to grow the kinds of things that we want to grow. In conjunction with that, you're going to hear from Kara in just a moment, almost a Dr. Casimiro. We have literally handpicked each of those 4 people and many other people to be part of our team. And Sal and I are like salt and pepper, left hand, right hand. We really work very, very well together. And we think very much alike. We're not yesing each other to death. We argue back and forth constantly. When the dust settles, the door opens, we come on, we have a good plan. So we're very mindful that Jim Collins, Good to Great, get the right people on the bus and put them in the right seats. These are the right people on the bus. They're in critical positions for us, and because of their leadership skills, we've been able to make the progress we've been able to make. Talked about budget. In our world, we have a small amount of money, so we have to skew it. As I mentioned, if there's no direct nexus to our 2 primary goals, we don't even look at it. Professional development, you've all heard this. It's, for us, it really means everything is job embedded. Again, if you can't make a direct nexus to the work that I do as a professional, I shouldn't be doing the work that I'm doing. Hiring, hire wisely, teacher evaluation. As Sal said, we use the Marzano model. The piece with us is really, Dweck's work and the growth mindset, and the idea through reflection we can get much better than we are. Assessments and data and feedback, we're very, very light on testing. We don't make a big dramatic thing about test scores. It's just not important to us. What's really important to us, we're all data junkies. So we work to get as smart as we can on this. I'm not going to spend any time on this. As Jonathan mentioned, we took the Common Core, both ELA and math, and then we looked at the 21st century skills through a variety of lenses. When the dust settled, we had teachers, we had administrators, building-based, district-wide, the Board of Education, parents, students, anybody who walked by the administration center, we'd call them in, what do you think about this? And when the dust settled, we do all 9 of these, but we spend a lot of time on making arguments based on evidence and problem-solving 21st century real-world problems. Last part for me is Sal's goal and my goals are identical. They're all around problem-solving and argument, whether it's in written form or graphical form or oral form, etc. Our goals are directly aligned to the Board of Education's goals. They have 2 goals. Our goals are the same. Every building principal, associate principal, assistant principal, every central office administrator, we all have the same goals. Every single teacher, K-12, we want to see a direct nexus to one of those 2 goals or possibly both. So we now have alignment in a way that we never have before, have had before. And as Sal said, we can walk into a kindergarten teacher's room where argumentative writing is grade 6, and we say, what are you going to do in kindergarten? And again, I can cite evidence of what we did and why I think it's a better thing than what you did. And we have those conversations ongoing throughout the district at the K-12 level. I'm going to turn over to Kara. That was Kara coughing earlier. She's not feeling that well today, but she is a rock star for us. She's our curriculum administrator for humanities, and she does many other things to make us smarter. Kara?
Good morning. So I got the 5-minute flag from Jonathan, so I want to just sort of get right to one nugget, at least in our presentation, so that you get a sense of that before you go away, or if you don't have time to stay for the panel discussion. As Dr. Glass and Dr. Pasquarella said, the idea with Coherence is to sort of slim down what we're doing into focus. And Jonathan's words really resonated with us when we first came in to present this idea of coherence to the district, because like many of you in the room right now, if you to review sort of your job descriptions and what you're responsible for over the course of the year, it could fill pages and pages and pages, and it can at times be overwhelming. And so once we went to this idea, this model of coherence, and it kind of focused down some things in my particular department, I felt a sense of relief, and it gave me a sense of purpose. It gave my teachers a sense of purpose, my department heads a sense of purpose, and the coaches, and then the building leaders as well, sort of all pulling in the same direction. So for the humanities department, we focused in on, I'm going to skip academic leader and go right to humanities. So one of my goals, and this also fed into the SLOs and IAGDs that I'm responsible for, but that teachers will increase proficiency with teaching students to construct arguments through evidence-based writing. And of course, we all know with Common Core standards that this is a high leverage skill, and that we would have to focus on this anyways. But we were going to kind of beat this to death in our humanities department in multiple ways, and also, of course, in our social studies department, it takes on different forms. We call them DBQs, document-based writing, but they end in an argument-based response. So to give you an idea what that work looked like in the humanities department, we had to develop assessments to go along with this. So what are we trying to measure? We're trying to see how kids progress with this skill over time. We put together a rubric based on SBAC writing performance standards, and we adopted the analytic categories found in the ELA, SBAC standard claims, that are aligned to the claims. And we had to develop a data system to sort of collect information around this. Kara Wanzer will be available to talk to you a little bit more about the data systems that we developed and the protocols that we engaged in order to get meaningful data. And that's kind of a key word that we'll talk about more in the panel, meaningful data. We had to develop anchor sets by proficiency level and scoring calibrations. I'm going to go right to that right now in the next step. So we had to develop very sophisticated benchmark assessments where we asked students to consider various options and various sides to an argument, and they needed to engage in constructing in that argument. We tried to align the assessment in a way that they would experience it in SBAC. We haven't quite digitized it yet, but we figured why not give them the same directions, the same time frames, the same tools that they would experience when they were to take those high-stakes tests later on in the year. Multiple reasons for engaging in the construction of an argument, different skill sets that we ask the kids to engage in, developing a written claim, assessing arguments and voices, looking at things like bias, and of course all of this we had to adhere to the ELA standards for each grade level. This was probably the most difficult work we had initially, was developing assessments that would be somewhat reliable and somewhat valid, given the fact that we'd have over 900 teachers scoring them in different ways, despite having a rubric that was standardized. And so that led us to some of the next work, which was the development of these anchor sets. And I can't tell you how critical this work is to any assessment that you're focusing on in your district right now, is the idea of having this sort of collaborative idea, calibration of scoring, and these engaged discussions about what does grade level student work look like at each grade level. How does grade 7-8 argumentative writing look different from grade 9-10? And those are very, very interesting and dicey conversations. We had our English teachers and our social studies teachers using the same rubric score our students on an analytic rubric, but come out with extremely different scores. So we knew we had a problem with the way that English teachers were holding students accountable for certain things, as opposed to the way our social studies teachers were holding students accountable. So we got the departments together. And those are some of the best conversations that we've had over the course of this year. Those teachers were clamoring to work together. Most of the work that we're focused in on at this point, in terms of my budget, how I use my professional development time, the topics of our PLC times, our data teams, the information that we're collecting, all focus in on how students are scoring, what their proficiency levels are in terms of their grade level performance over the course of the year. So this is the majority of the work that we're engaged in. We're still responsible, obviously, for all the other things that come along in the department, and there's teacher evaluation that plays into all of this. There's, as our jobs, we're constantly, still responsible for, what's happening with curriculum, what's happening, developing university partnerships, and so on and so forth. But in terms of the finding of the time, slicing out the majority of our time, we're increasing the amount of time that we're talking about argumentative writing. in terms of pedagogy, in terms of curriculum, in terms of instruction, and how we move our department forward with that. The data collection, want me to wrap up? Okay, we'll talk more about the data collection. Kira Wanza has a lot of information about that. This trickled down into, of course, the student level and the teacher level, and goal setting across all buildings. And of course, it informed all of the different professional development that we had, from the district to the building, content level, and of course, right down to instructional strategies in the classroom. And then this slide we discussed earlier, so we'll talk more about that. If we were to show you our coherence plan, you can see how everything fits in under each level, and every single one of those steps has their own SLOs and IEGDs that we are all accountable for at different levels. And if anybody would like to stay after for the panel discussion, we'll take care of any questions that you have. And we've done a lot of work, and we're totally willing to share, and you can hit us up for anything that you'd like. Thanks.